I stared at the eviction notice in my trembling hands. 30 days. That's all the time I had left before my grandson and I would be on the streets. Tommy was only 8 years old. After my daughter's death 2 years ago, he became my whole world. But raising a child on a fixed income and a part-time grocery store salary was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The medical bills from her cancer treatment had drained every penny I'd saved over 40 years of nursing. "Grandma, are we going to be okay?" I looked down at Tommy's worried face and forced a smile I didn't feel. "Of course, sweetheart. Grandma always figures things out." But I had no idea how. I'd already borrowed from every friend, maxed out every credit card, sold everything of value. The bank had laughed when I applied for a loan. At 63 with no assets and mounting debt, I was what they politely called high risk. That night, after Tommy fell asleep clutching his worn stuffed elephant, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, searching desperately for any solution. That's when I saw the advertisement. Companion needed for private arrangement. Room and board provided plus generous compensation. Discretion required. My cursor hovered over the listing. It seemed too good to be true, which usually meant it was. But desperate people don't have the luxury of being cautious. I clicked and filled out the application before I could talk myself out of it. The response came within an hour. A phone number and an address in the wealthy Riverside district. An appointment for the following morning at 10. I almost didn't go. 3 times I turned the car around, telling myself this was how people ended up in terrible situations. But then I'd think of Tommy, of the streets, of having to tell him I'd failed to keep us safe. So I kept driving. The house was more of an estate, really. Stone walls, iron gates, perfectly manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than my annual salary. A security camera swiveled to track my old Honda as I pulled up to the intercom. "State your name and purpose," a voice crackled. "Margaret Fletcher. I have an appointment." The gates swung open silently. A woman in a crisp suit met me at the door. She didn't smile, didn't offer her hand, just looked me up and down with cool assessment. "You're the applicant?" Her tone suggested she'd expected someone younger, prettier, more sophisticated. "Yes, ma'am. Follow me." She led me through rooms that belonged in magazines, all high ceilings and expensive artwork and furniture that probably cost more than my car. We stopped at a pair of oak doors. She knocked once, then opened them. "The applicant is here, Mr. Sterling." The study was dark, despite the morning sun. Heavy curtains blocked most of the light, leaving only a desk lamp to illuminate the figure sitting behind an enormous desk. He wore a black suit, but what struck me immediately was the black mask covering the entire lower half of his face. "Mrs. Fletcher." His voice was muffled but clear. "Please, sit." I lowered myself into the leather chair across from him, my heart hammering. This was wrong. Everything about this screamed danger, but I needed to hear what he had to say. "I reviewed your application. Former registered nurse, widow, raising a grandson. Currently facing eviction and approximately $85,000 in debt from medical bills." My cheeks burned. "That's accurate. I'm prepared to offer you a solution." He slid a folder across the desk. "A contract position. You would live here, in this house, and fulfill certain duties. In exchange, I will pay off all your debts immediately and provide you with a salary of $5,000 per month." I opened the folder with shaking hands. The contract was there, official and legal looking, but the terms made my stomach drop. "You want a live-in companion who will appear in public with you at social events, maintain the household, and—" I looked up sharply. "Share your bedroom? Not in the way you're thinking." He leaned back, and I noticed how he kept his hands hidden under the desk. "I need someone who can convince the world that I have a normal life. My business partners are growing concerned about my reclusive nature. They believe I've become unstable. Having a companion, someone respectable and genuine, would alleviate their concerns. Why me? Why not hire an actress, someone young and beautiful? Because you're exactly what you appear to be. A grandmother who needs help. There's no artifice, no pretense, and you have nursing experience, which brings me to the second part of the arrangement." He finally brought his hands up, and I understood why he'd kept them hidden. Both hands were wrapped entirely in black bandages, so thick they looked like clubs. He couldn't possibly have full use of them. "I have a condition," he said quietly. It's not contagious, not dangerous to you or your grandson, but it requires daily care. Bandage changes, medication application, monitoring for infection. You would handle this aspect of my care privately. No one else would know. What happened to your hands? That's not part of this discussion. His tone went cold. The question is whether you can do this. Whether you can live here with your grandson, play the role of my companion in public, provide medical care in private, and keep your mouth shut about what you see. Can you do that, Mrs. Fletcher? I thought of Tommy, of the eviction notice, of eating ramen noodles for the third night in a row because that's all I could afford, of the look on my daughter's face when she made me promise to take care of her son no matter what. How long would this arrangement last? 1 year. At the end, you'll receive a bonus of $50,000 and we part ways. You'll have had a year to save your salary, plus the bonus. Enough to start fresh, find a stable situation for yourself and your grandson. And if I want to leave before then, you can. But you forfeit all compensation beyond what you've already been paid, and you'll be liable for the debt payments I've made on your behalf. It was a golden cage, but it was still a cage. Yet what choice did I have? I need to talk to my grandson. He's been through so much already, I won't traumatize him further. For the first time, something shifted in Mr. Sterling's posture. He seemed almost surprised. You're negotiating? I'm protecting my grandson. If you want someone genuine, someone real, then you need to understand that he comes first, always. A long pause. Then he nodded slowly. Bring him to meet me, tomorrow. If he's uncomfortable, we'll call it off. I hadn't expected that. Really? I may be many things, Mrs. Fletcher, but I don't traumatize children. He stood, extending one bandaged hand. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I shook his hand carefully, feeling the bulk of the bandages, wondering what horror lay beneath. That night, I sat Tommy down and tried to explain in 8-year-old terms that we might be moving to a big house to help take care of a man who was sick. Is he nice? Tommy asked, ever trusting. I don't know yet, sweetheart. That's why we're going to meet him tomorrow. If you don't like him, we won't go. But then where will we live? I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo. I'll figure something out. I always do. The next day, I dressed Tommy in his best clothes and drove back to the estate. This time, Mr. Sterling met us in a sunlit conservatory filled with plants. He still wore the mask, but he'd chosen a less intimidating setting. Tommy hid behind my legs when we entered. You must be Tommy. Mr. Sterling's voice was gentler than I'd heard before. Your grandmother tells me you're 8 years old. Tommy nodded but didn't speak. I was 8 once. Seems like 1,000 years ago now. Mr. Sterling gestured to a table set with lemonade and cookies. I thought you might be hungry. The cookies are homemade. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, makes them every Tuesday. At the mention of cookies, Tommy perked up slightly. We sat, and I watched as Mr. Sterling awkwardly lifted his glass with both bandaged hands, clearly struggling with the grip. What happened to your hands? Tommy asked with the blunt curiosity of childhood. Tommy! I started to scold him. But Mr. Sterling held up one bandaged hand. It's all right. It's an honest question. He set down his glass. I had an accident a long time ago. Sometimes accidents leave marks that don't go away. Like my mom? Tommy's voice got small. She had an accident too. In her body. That's why she died. The room went silent. I felt tears prick my eyes, but Mr. Sterling just nodded slowly. Yes. Like your mom. I'm sorry you lost her. Grandma says we have to be brave. She says Mom is watching us and wants us to be happy. Your grandma is a wise woman. Mr. Sterling looked at me, and even through the mask, I felt the weight of his gaze. Tommy, if you and your grandmother came to live here, you'd have your own room. There's a library with books, a game room, a yard to play in. You'd go to the same school, see the same friends, but your home would be here. Would that be okay with you? Tommy looked at me, his small hand finding mine. Would you be happy, Grandma? How did I answer that? I'd be trapped in a strange arrangement with a mysterious man, pretending to be something I wasn't, but we'd be safe, fed, warm, together. I think, I said carefully, that sometimes we do hard things because they lead to good things. And keeping us together, keeping us safe, that's a very good thing. Tommy thought about this, his face serious beyond his years. Then he looked at Mr. Sterling. "Do you promise not to hurt my grandma?" "I promise." "And you won't be mean to her?" "I'll treat her with respect." Tommy nodded, satisfied with the child's simple certainty that adults keep their promises. "Okay then." And just like that, our lives changed. We moved in 3 days later. Tommy got a bedroom bigger than our entire apartment had been, with a window seat overlooking the garden. My room was connected to Mr. Sterling's by a private bathroom, the suite arrangement that maintained the illusion of a couple while allowing privacy. The first night, after I'd tucked Tommy in and read him 3 bedtime stories, I knocked on the connecting door. "Come in." Mr. Sterling sat in a leather chair, still masked, still wearing his suit despite the late hour. A medical kit sat on the table beside him. "I'll need you to change the bandages," he said without preamble. "I'll walk you through it." My hands were steadier than I expected as I unwrapped the layers of black fabric. Years of nursing had prepared me for a lot, but nothing quite prepared me for what I found underneath. His hands were covered in burn scars, thick and twisted, the skin a patchwork of grafts and healing tissue. Some areas were still raw, requiring daily treatment. But worse than the physical damage was what the burns had done to his hands' functionality. His fingers were stiff, several fused partially together. Simple tasks I took for granted would be agonizing struggles for him. "How?" I whispered. "I told you. An accident. This wasn't just an accident. This was not your concern." His voice went hard. "Just clean the wounds, apply the medication, and rebandage. That's all I need from you." So I did, working in silence, my nurse's training taking over. I cleaned each area gently, applied the prescribed ointments, wrapped everything carefully in fresh bandages. The whole process took nearly an hour. "There," I said finally. "How does that feel?" "Better." He flexed his fingers slightly, wincing. "Thank you. You should be doing physical therapy. These scars, they'll keep tightening if you don't work them." "I know what I should be doing, Mrs. Fletcher." "It's Margaret. And stubborn is going to cost you what little mobility you have left." His eyes met mine, and I saw surprise there. "You're lecturing me? I'm being honest with you. Isn't that what you hired me for? Someone genuine?" A long pause. Then, incredibly, I heard what might have been a laugh from behind the mask. "Fair enough, Margaret. I'll consider the physical therapy." The days fell into a pattern. I'd wake early, make breakfast for Tommy, send him off to school. Then I'd handle household matters with Mrs. Chen, who warmed to me slowly as she realized I wasn't trying to take over her domain. Afternoons were for Tommy's homework and play. Evenings, after he was in bed, I'd care for Mr. Sterling's hands. We spoke little during those sessions at first. But gradually, in the quiet of his room with only the medical care between us, fragments of conversation emerged. "You're good with Tommy," he said one night. "Patient. He's a good boy, made better by his mother's love, even in her absence." "What was she like?" "Your daughter?" I paused in wrapping his left hand. "She was sunlight. That kind of person who made everyone around her feel brighter just by existing. When she got sick, it was like watching an eclipse. Slow, inevitable, until one day the light was just gone." "I'm sorry. Death is a thief," I said softly. "It takes and doesn't care what it leaves behind." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes, it is." The social events started in the second month. Dinners with his business partners, charity galas, art exhibition openings. I wore the expensive dresses his assistant purchased, learned to make small talk about investments and portfolios and things I'd never cared about before. Mr. Sterling was always at my side, his bandaged hands hidden in black gloves now, the mask, a constant presence that people politely pretended not to notice. In public, he'd rest his gloved hand on my back, guide me through crowds, lean in as if we were sharing private jokes. The performance was flawless. But I noticed things. The way people stared, the whispered conversations that stopped when we approached, the barely concealed pity in some eyes, curiosity in others, and occasionally, disgust. "They think I'm a monster," he said one night after a particularly awkward dinner party. I was cleaning his hands, and his voice was more tired than usual. "They think you're mysterious." "Be honest, Margaret. You promised me honesty." I met his eyes. They think the mask and gloves are eccentric at best, disturbing at worst. But that says more about them than you. Does it disturb you? The mask? No. What disturbs me is that you wear it at all, in your own home, with only Tommy and me around. I have my reasons. I'm sure you do. But one day you might trust us enough to share them. He didn't respond to that. Tommy adjusted better than I'd expected. He liked the big house, the good food, and the fact that he could have friends over without being embarrassed about where he lived. But he'd grown curious about Mr. Sterling. Why does he wear that mask, Grandma? He has his reasons, sweetheart. Is he sad? He seems sad. From the mouths of babes. Yes, honey. I think he is. We should make him happy. Like Mom used to make people happy. So Tommy started leaving drawings outside Mr. Sterling's study. Crayon pictures of the house, the garden, stick figures labeled Tommy, Grandma, and Mr. Sterling. Sometimes there were dinosaurs or spaceships, products of an 8-year-old's imagination. I didn't know if Mr. Sterling noticed until one evening when I entered his study to bring him dinner. There, pinned to a corkboard usually reserved for business documents, were Tommy's drawings. Every single one. He has talent, Mr. Sterling said, not looking up from his papers. The spatial awareness in this one is quite good for his age. He wants you to be happy. I know. He set down his pen, which I noticed he held awkwardly in his fused fingers. I don't deserve that kindness. Why not? Because I've done things, Margaret. Made choices that led to consequences I can't escape. We've all made choices. What matters is what we do after. He finally looked at me. Do you really believe that? I'm here, aren't I? I chose to marry a stranger for money, to uproot my grandson's life, to live a lie. But I'm making the best of it. I'm making it real. Something shifted in his expression. Is that what you're doing? Making it real? Isn't that what you hired me for? The months passed. Winter gave way to spring. Tommy had his 9th birthday, and to my surprise, Mr. Sterling arranged a party with Tommy's entire class invited, complete with a magician and a bounce house. I watched him standing at the edge of the chaos, this masked, gloved figure who'd made a little boy's day special, and felt something in my chest tighten. This was supposed to be temporary, a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way, it had become something else. I started to notice the way Mr. Sterling would listen for Tommy's laughter. How he'd leave classical music playing in the conservatory because I'd mentioned once that I found it soothing. The way his shoulders would relax slightly when I entered the room. And I noticed my own reactions too. The flutter in my stomach when his gloved hand touched my back. The way I'd catch myself watching him, wondering what thoughts moved behind those guarded eyes. The strange domesticity of our evening routine, caring for his hands while we talked about nothing and everything. This is dangerous, I told myself in the mirror one night. You're falling for a man you barely know, a man who won't even show you his face. But knowing something is dangerous and being able to stop it are two different things. The change happened on a random Tuesday in May. I'd just finished putting Tommy to bed and was heading to Mr. Sterling's room for the usual bandage change when I heard a crash. I ran the rest of the way, throwing open the connecting door without knocking. Mr. Sterling was on the floor of his bathroom, one hand clutching the sink, the other pressed against his chest. The mask had come loose, hanging from one ear. "I'm fine," he gasped, but his face was gray with pain. "Just dizzy." I stood up too fast. I knelt beside him, my nursing instincts taking over. Pulse rapid, breathing shallow, signs of panic or cardiac distress. "How long have you been feeling dizzy?" "A few days." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." I reached for the mask to remove it properly so he could breathe better, and he caught my wrist with his bandaged hand. "Don't. You need to breathe." "Let me help you." "You don't understand. You can't see. I'm a nurse, remember? I've seen everything. Now let go and let me help you." For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then his hand dropped, and he closed his eyes, turning his face away like a man awaiting execution. I removed the mask carefully. The lower half of his face was scarred like his hands, but not as severely, a burn pattern that ran along his jaw and neck, pulling the skin tight in places. His lips were affected too, slightly distorted by scar tissue. It was clearly from the same accident that had destroyed his hands, but it wasn't monstrous. It was just human. A face marked by pain and survival. "There," I said gently, setting the mask aside. "Now breathe slowly, in through your nose, out through your mouth." He did, and gradually his color improved, his breathing steadied, but he wouldn't look at me. "I know I'm hideous," he said finally. "You don't have to pretend otherwise. You're not hideous. You're a man who survived something terrible and carries the scars. People stare, they recoil, even the doctors, the ones who are supposed to be professional about it." I sat back on my heels, studying him. "May I ask what happened? The real story?" A long silence. Then, there was a fire. At a facility I owned, a chemical manufacturing plant. We'd been cutting costs, ignoring safety recommendations, pushing production. I knew it was dangerous, but the profit margins were too good to resist. His voice went flat, reciting facts like a confession. The fire started on a night shift. 37 people were working. I was there because I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about a deal, about money, about all the wrong things. When the alarms went, I could have run. Should have run. But I went back in. Why? Because I heard screaming. Because I'd caused this with my greed and negligence. Because for the first time in my selfish life, I thought about someone other than myself. He finally met my eyes. I got 12 people out before the chemical explosion. Got my hands and face burned badly enough that I spent 6 months in the hospital wishing I'd died. 25 people didn't make it out at all. Tears tracked down his scarred face. I wear the mask because I deserve to be hidden. Because I'm responsible for 25 deaths. Because every time someone looks at me with pity or disgust, I think maybe that's the punishment I earned. I understood then. The isolation, the reclusiveness, the elaborate pretense of normalcy with me and Tommy. He'd been trying to do penance, to hide from a world he'd harmed. "What were their names?" I asked quietly. He looked startled. "What?" "The 25 people who died. Do you know their names?" "Every single one. I've memorized them, visited their families, set up trusts, paid for counseling, college funds, anything they needed. Not that it brings anyone back. And the 12 you saved? What about them? Do you know their names too?" "Yes. But nothing. You made a terrible mistake. You owned it. You went back into a burning building and saved 12 lives at the cost of your own body. That doesn't erase the 25, but it doesn't disappear either. You don't understand. I understand that you've been punishing yourself for 5 years. I understand that you've hidden from the world because you think you don't deserve to be part of it. I understand that you hired me because you're desperately lonely but convinced yourself you don't deserve companionship." I reached out and took his bandaged hand. "But here's what you need to understand. Those 12 people you saved? They have families. Children who still have a parent. Spouses who still have a partner. You gave them that. It doesn't balance out." "No, it doesn't. But that's not how life works. We don't get neat equations where good cancels out bad. We just live with both and try to do better." He stared at our joined hands. "Why aren't you disgusted with me? With what I did? What I look like? Because I've spent the last 6 months getting to know you. I've seen you hang Tommy's drawings on your wall. I've watched you listen to classical music because it soothes someone else. I've felt you guide me through crowds, protecting me even though I'm supposed to be the hired companion." I squeezed his hand gently. "You're not the man who made those terrible choices. Or rather, you are, but you're also the man who went back into the fire. And you're the man who spent 5 years trying to make amends. That's who I see. Margaret." His voice broke. "And as for your face, your hands, they're part of you. They tell a story of survival and sacrifice. Why would I be disgusted by that?" He pulled me closer with surprising strength, his bandaged hands awkward but determined, and buried his face against my shoulder. He shook with silent sobs, 5 years of isolation and guilt pouring out. I held him, this broken, scarred man who'd somehow become more than a business arrangement, and let him cry. When he finally pulled back, his face was blotchy and tear-stained, scars standing out against flushed skin. But he wasn't wearing the mask, and he met my eyes without flinching. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. The real me. That's what genuine people do, I said softly. They see each other. Something changed between us that night. He stopped wearing the mask around the house, though he kept the gloves for public appearances to protect his sensitive hands. Tommy's initial surprise at seeing Mr. Sterling's face gave way to rapid acceptance. "You look like a warrior," Tommy declared at breakfast the next morning. "Like you fought a dragon." Mr. Sterling, I'd started thinking of him as Michael, which was his first name, smiled. It was crooked because of the scar tissue, but it was genuine, something like that. Cool. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. The weeks that followed felt different. Michael started joining us for breakfast, then dinner. He'd play chess with Tommy, teaching him strategy. He'd sit in the conservatory with me, listening to music, sometimes talking, sometimes just being present together. "I'm not paying you to spend leisure time with me," he said one evening, though his tone was light. "Consider it a bonus service. Companionship, genuine variety. Is it still genuine if it's contracted?" I looked at him, at his scarred face now familiar and dear, at the way he held his teacup awkwardly in his damaged hands, at the man who'd emerged from behind the mask. "I don't know. You tell me." He set down his cup and took my hand. "I don't want this to be a contract anymore, Margaret. I don't want you here because you're being paid. I want you here because you choose to be." My heart hammered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you. Somewhere between Tommy's drawings and your stubborn nursing advice and the way you see past the scars to something worth loving, I fell completely in love with you." He squeezed my hand. "I know the contract has 6 more months. I know you might not feel the same way, but I needed you to know that this isn't business for me anymore. It's real." "Michael, you don't have to say anything now. I just wanted you to know. And whatever you decide, the financial arrangements stand. You've earned every penny." "You fool," I said, tears in my eyes. "I fell in love with you months ago. I've been terrified because I thought this was all pretend to you, that I was just playing a role." "You were never playing a role. You made it real. Remember? You made everything real." He leaned forward, and I met him halfway, our lips meeting in a kiss that was gentle and awkward and perfect. His scarred hands cupped my face, and I didn't flinch, didn't pull away. I just kissed him back, this man who'd saved me from the streets and let me save him from his isolation. "Gross," Tommy's voice came from the doorway. "You guys are kissing." We broke apart, laughing, and Michael held out one hand. "Come here, kiddo." Tommy ran over, and Michael pulled him into a hug. "How would you feel if your grandma and I made this arrangement permanent?" "Really permanent? You mean like get married for real?" "Exactly like that." Tommy looked at me. "Would you be happy, Grandma?" I looked at Michael, at his scarred face and damaged hands and beautiful heart. "Yes, sweetheart, I would be very happy." "Then okay." Tommy grinned. "But can I be in the wedding? And can we have cake?" "Absolutely yes to both," Michael promised. We did get married again. This time for real. In the conservatory, with flowers and music, and Tommy as our ring bearer. Michael didn't wear the mask. He stood before our small gathering of friends, the business partners who'd become genuine companions, Mrs. Chen, who cried through the whole ceremony, Tommy's school friends and their parents who'd learned to see past the scars, and he smiled his crooked smile. "I was hiding when I found you," he said during his vows. "Hiding from the world, from myself, from the possibility of connection. You didn't let me hide. You saw me, scars and sins and all, and you chose to love me anyway. You made me real again." "You saved me first," I replied. "Not with money, though that helped. You saved me by letting me care for someone again, by giving Tommy a home, by showing me that it's never too late to start over. You made our life real." The judge pronounced us married, and we kissed while Tommy cheered, and Mrs. Chen sobbed happily. It was perfect and imperfect and wonderfully, genuinely real. Later, when the guests had left and Tommy was asleep, Michael and I sat in the conservatory. He'd removed his gloves, and I held his scarred hands in mine. "I never thought I'd have this," he said quietly. "A family, love, a second chance." Neither did I. I thought my life was over, that I'd failed everyone. But it turns out, endings can be beginnings, if you're brave enough to accept help, and stubborn enough to give it even when it's not wanted. I laughed. That too. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles with his scarred mouth. Thank you for seeing me, Margaret. For making me believe I was worth seeing. Thank you for letting me. For trusting me with your scars. We sat there in the moonlight, two damaged people who'd found wholeness in each other, and listened to the classical music drift through the room. Outside, the garden grew in the darkness, and inside, our family slept safely under one roof. It wasn't the life I'd planned, it was better. Because the best things in life are rarely planned. They're found in the desperate moments when we're brave enough to take a chance, to accept help, to look past surfaces to the soul beneath. Michael had hidden behind his mask for 5 years, convinced he was too broken to deserve love. I'd been drowning in debt and despair, convinced I had nothing left to offer. But together, we discovered that broken pieces can fit together in unexpected ways, creating something more beautiful than either of us had been before. And sometimes, the person you're hired to save ends up saving you right back.